Have you ever wondered if there might be something so unsettling within Jesus' life stories that powerful groups would do anything to hide it? People talk about lost manuscripts, alternative gospels, and unexplained gaps in scripture. But what if certain revelations were so disturbing they risked shaking the foundation of everything we assume about faith? The phrase, "scariest lost knowledge of Jesus," might sound like a dramatic label, but it reflects the sense of mystery and even dread surrounding writings thought to be locked away in hidden vaults or declared heretical centuries ago. In the early days of the Christian movement, countless teachings circulated among small communities. Some were accepted as sacred truth, while others vanished under suspicious circumstances. Many still believe these writings hold shocking insights into Jesus' deepest teachings about human nature and the cosmos. Curiosity about what might lie in these forbidden texts has only grown over time. Historians and theologians trace faint references to gospels and letters once revered by certain followers, but later banned by church authority. Rumors speak of cryptic scrolls discovered in desert caves, or of accounts of Jesus' words that differ radically from the official versions. Scholars debate whether these rumors have any substance, but here's something that has persisted: repeated claims that the most unsettling information wasn't suppressed merely because it contradicted mainstream doctrine, but because it threatened to expose truth so immense they could upend society's standard structures of power. Is it mere speculation, or a legitimate fear that revealing these hidden lessons would spark massive upheaval? Over the centuries, councils formed to define which teachings were deemed legitimate. In the process, entire texts were excluded and, in many cases, destroyed. No one can deny that some voices were erased from the official story. When people talk about lost knowledge, they often point to the Gnostic Gospels or references to Mary Magdalene as a key witness. Others speculate about manuscripts describing Jesus' travels outside Judea or supernatural feats that defy easy explanation. Yet if we look closely, we find that certain themes keep reappearing. The idea of inner power, hidden prophecies, warnings of dire events, and the notion that each person holds a spark of the divine. Could this be the root of it all? In these next sections, we'll explore the hush-hush legends, the controversies, and the glaring omissions that suggest something earth-shaking might lie behind the veil of history. From rumors of locked Vatican archives to cryptic references in the margins of long-forgotten scrolls, we will look at how the very notion of forbidden knowledge surrounding Jesus has intrigued and terrified people in equal measure. And, as you follow along, keep in mind that everything presented here is more than mere conspiracy. It's also an invitation to consider how our spiritual landscape might shift if such revelations were proven true. Buckle up, because what some believe we were never meant to discover may just change how you perceive not only Jesus, but humanity's destiny itself. Some say the origins of Jesus' hidden knowledge can be traced to the murky early years of the Christian faith, when small gatherings of believers shared different accounts of his teachings. During that period, often described as chaotic, yet fertile, dozens of writings circulated among various Christian sects. Some groups placed emphasis on mysticism and symbolic interpretations, while others followed what they claimed were literal instructions handed down by apostles. This diversity was vibrant, yet it also paved the way for disagreements, and soon, enough power struggles emerged. Leaders stepped forward to declare which texts were valid, labeling other documents as misleading or even dangerous. One particularly intriguing rumor involves fragments of parchment said to contain alternative nativity stories. These scraps allegedly painted a picture of Jesus' infancy that deviated from the narrative most of us know by heart. Details about hidden visits by enigmatic figures, subtle references to supernatural events that extend well beyond the star in Bethlehem, and strange mentions of cosmic signs at his birth. Although stories like these are difficult to verify, the persistent whisper is that if these accounts gained acceptance, they might challenge the idea of Jesus' mission as a simple linear path. Equally puzzling are the claims of hidden teachings that describe Jesus as a young traveler who ventured beyond Galilee to study with spiritual masters from distant lands. While mainstream scholarship typically doesn't endorse the notion of Jesus traveling far beyond Judea, the rumor persists. Those who promote these tales argue that certain mystical elements of his later ministry reflect esoteric wisdom from Egypt, Persia, or even further east. Could it be that the lost knowledge is partly about bridging Eastern and Western perspectives on spirituality? Or is this all just romanticized speculation? Yet perhaps the most disconcerting aspect is not whether Jesus traveled widely, but the implications of any alternative accounts that show him in a markedly different light, perhaps more human at times, or conversely, even more otherworldly. Some early writings that were later declared heretical portray Jesus as a guide to secret inner transformations, rather than an authoritative figure who delivered a set of fixed rules. Had these texts remained mainstream, the entire structure of Christian worship might look radically different today. This is where the lines begin to blur. What did these texts really say, and why did the official church deem them threatening enough to eradicate? A question that arises is whether the danger lay in these teachings' potential to shift the power dynamic. If spiritual authority were to reside within each individual, then institutional hierarchies might have faced resistance. It's not hard to see why certain leaders would do everything in their power to stifle any talk of a Jesus who empowered people on a profound, individual level. And that brings us to the bigger controversies brewing in the next section. In the first few centuries after Jesus' lifetime, the Christian world was a patchwork of beliefs. Pockets of believers venerated texts that we no longer even hear about today. The Gospel of Peter, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of the Hebrews, and many others. The broader population might not realize that, before the biblical canon was finalized, these writings had genuine followers who believed them to be authentic transmissions of Jesus' message. This diversity threatened to splinter Christianity into countless factions, each with its own interpretation and authority figure. Leaders who sought unity recognized that they needed a definitive canon, one set of teachings to be recognized as the universal truth. By the time the Council of Nicaea took place in 325 AD, the stage was set for a momentous decision. Certain books were in and others were out. The reasons for exclusion often boiled down to theology and political considerations, not simply historical reliability. In many cases, the texts that emphasized inner spiritual knowledge or posed difficult questions about authority had to be eliminated. The leaders of the institutional church recognized they needed a cohesive narrative to maintain order. A text suggesting Jesus taught personal divinity and radical autonomy might undermine hierarchical control. Therefore, such writings were systematically branded as heresy. The Gnostic Christians posed a particular challenge. They believed salvation came from hidden knowledge, a spark of divine insight that each person could discover within themselves. Their perspective often downplayed the significance of external rituals, favoring spiritual awakening over obedience to a physical hierarchy. This approach clashed with the emerging structure of an institutionalized church, which relied on established leaders and standardized doctrine. As a result, Gnostic scriptures faced brutal suppression. Although many Gnostic texts were lost forever, some survived in secret, only to resurface hundreds of years later, such as in the Nag Hammadi library discovered in the mid-20th century. This historical background of competition and suppression fuels today's fascination with scariest lost knowledge of Jesus. People question if the institutional church buried certain texts out of fear that they held powerful truths. What if these texts contained revelations about our own divinity, or about Jesus' role as a teacher who came to illuminate a universal spiritual path rather than create an exclusive religion? Even more unnerving is the notion that there might be entire chapters of Jesus' life that the official record glosses over. Skeptics dismiss these claims as conspiracies, pointing out that the church had valid reasons to unify believers under one doctrine. Nonetheless, the possibility remains that the final compilation we inherited was shaped by more than just pure faith. It was shaped by politics and fear of dissent. Throughout the centuries, rumors have persisted that the most radical, mind-bending texts are locked away in secret vaults, particularly in the Vatican's restricted library. It said that access is granted only to a handful of individuals with special clearance, lest the broader public read these hidden lines and start asking uncomfortable questions. True or not, the very idea of concealed volumes teases the imagination. What shocking teachings might still lie under the shadow of official disapproval? One of the more enduring legends about Jesus is that he traveled to places far beyond the territory described in the conventional Gospels, long before he began his public ministry. Some speculative accounts place him among the ascetics of Egypt, learning arcane secrets once reserved for pharaohs and high priests. Others suggest he ventured along the Silk Road, where he encountered Persian magi and possibly even made his way toward distant Asian lands. Although these stories lack firm historical evidence, they have captivated those who believe that Jesus' lost years, from childhood to about age 30, were filled with spiritual explorations. In these hypothetical journeys, Jesus supposedly encountered teachings on meditation, reincarnation, and cosmic harmony that would have been foreign to his fellow Nazarene villagers. If true, these influences might explain why certain Gnostic texts emphasize self-knowledge and the concept of direct communion with the divine, paralleling Eastern philosophies that consider enlightenment an inward quest. Scholars who entertain these ideas caution that mainstream theology typically dismisses them because there's a complete lack of official documents or archaeological proof. Still, where official history remains silent, popular imagination tends to fill the gap. Consider the implication. If Jesus absorbed esoteric practices beyond his homeland, then his message might carry universal threads connecting multiple faith traditions. This possibility can be exhilarating or unsettling, depending on one's perspective. It challenges the neat boundaries that separate religions, implying that Jesus might have been more global and inclusive than we typically acknowledge. Such a revelation would also undermine the notion that his teachings were uniquely generated in a small corner of the Roman Empire. It raises the question, were the lost Gospels deemed too controversial, partly because they revealed a Jesus who drew from non-Jewish sources and integrated them into his own spiritual blueprint? In many ways, the scariest element of this lost knowledge might be the threat it poses to traditional exclusivity. If Jesus' mission was informed by broad, spiritual wisdom, then the usual lines distinguishing orthodox from heretical become blurry. Could it be that behind these rumors lies a genuine fear that, if the public learned Jesus had engaged with Eastern mystics, the Church's authoritative structure would weaken? After all, mainstream Christian identity has often depended on the belief that its doctrines formed in a unique divine context. Still, there's more to uncover. Some sources point to apocryphal texts that claim Jesus' ability to heal and perform miracles was linked to advanced knowledge of cosmic laws, an understanding that transcended the everyday perception of reality. If that were true, it opens the door to the possibility that he taught these methods to a select few. Whether these stories are historically grounded or merely fantasy, the overarching theme is that from his earliest days, Jesus' life might contain hidden chapters that, if revealed, could forever alter the conventional interpretation of his teachings. And these transformations in understanding only become more profound when we examine the cryptic lessons on human potential often attributed to him. One recurring element in the so-called forbidden texts is the astonishing power attributed to human beings themselves. Certain Gnostic writings and other apocryphal manuscripts propose that Jesus taught people to recognize their own divine spark, a fragment of the Creator dwelling within. This goes far beyond the notion of humans merely being God's children in a symbolic sense. It suggests that through proper understanding, we can access capabilities generally viewed as reserved for the divine. Suddenly, we're not dealing with a figure who simply says, "Follow me," but one who insists we have the capacity to work miracles, heal ourselves, and even shape reality through our thoughts and spiritual alignment. Such ideas, if ever fully embraced, could be revolutionary. They call into question the structure of religious worship that hinges on a vertical relationship: God above, humanity below, and the Church acting as the mediator. Instead, these alternative texts propose a far more direct and personal connection with the divine. In some accounts, Jesus reveals a technique or path by which individuals awaken latent powers. Whether that path is described in metaphors of light and darkness or in references to hidden truths, the outcome is the same: a sense of spiritual empowerment that bypasses institutional gatekeepers. It's not hard to see why this would be alarming to certain authorities, both secular and religious. If people believed they had the inherent ability to communicate directly with the divine realm, or even to co-create their reality, hierarchical systems might be questioned. Take, for instance, the idea that the mind and heart, when united, can move mountains. This concept resonates in the canonical Gospels too, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed. But the suppressed texts often amplify it to an extreme degree, implying that an enlightened soul can transcend the limitations that most accept as normal. Critics of these theories argue that if Jesus really taught such powerful, individual-focused lessons, it's odd that they wouldn't appear more clearly in the accepted scriptures. Supporters counter that the Bible indeed hints at extraordinary potential in passages that have simply been interpreted in a less radical way for centuries, and so the tension remains. On one side, there's a promise that each believer holds something breathtaking within. On the other side, a major religious institution has historically cautioned that too much emphasis on personal gnosis can lead to confusion or misinterpretation. As we dig deeper, the question persists: were these intense teachings deliberately hidden or deemed too advanced for general comprehension? If a large proportion of believers suddenly embraced the notion that they could tap into the same power Jesus demonstrated, the implications would be vast. The whole structure of religious worship might shift, leaving traditional leadership struggling to maintain relevance. And in the backdrop of these debates, the figure of Mary Magdalene emerges with her own share of controversies, shedding more light on what may have been kept out of the public eye. Mary Magdalene, frequently portrayed in popular culture as a simple follower of Jesus, takes on an entirely different dimension in certain apocryphal texts. The Gospel of Mary, discovered in fragments, suggests she was not just a disciple, but possibly a key confidant who grasped the most esoteric layers of Jesus' message. Although mainstream Christian tradition puts significant emphasis on apostles like Peter and John, alternative accounts highlight Mary Magdalene as someone entrusted with deeper insight which even the other disciples struggled to comprehend. If true, that would upend centuries of patriarchal storytelling, adding yet another reason such texts might have been sidelined. In these marginalized writings, Mary Magdalene emerges as a visionary who sees realms beyond ordinary perception and converses with a resurrected Jesus about cosmic truths. Some interpret her role as that of a true companion and spiritual equal, not merely a peripheral figure. Imagine the shock to established structures if it were widely accepted that a woman had been chosen to carry on the core teachings of the Messiah, especially in an era when women often had minimal authority in religious circles. Critics maintain that these ideas are speculative, but the repeated references to Mary Magdalene in various suppressed texts suggest her importance was greater than traditionally taught, nor is she the only one. There are also stories involving lesser-known apostles, Thomas, for instance, whose accounts sometimes depict Jesus in ways that deviate from the standard four Gospels. The Gospel of Thomas famously contains statements that emphasize introspection and the kingdom of God as an internal state. These texts don't always contradict the canonical Gospels directly, but they do shift the emphasis away from external worship and more toward personal awakening. One might suspect that such an approach, if widely embraced, could weaken the institution's hold. Hence, many believe these alternative accounts were weeded out to keep Christianity more uniform and hierarchical. Meanwhile, Mary Magdalene's expanded significance points to the possibility that the earliest Christian communities might have been more diverse in leadership roles and theological interpretation. If her story had remained central, we could be looking at a faith tradition with a stronger female presence at every level, drastically altering how spiritual authority is perceived. For many, this is a thrilling vision of a more inclusive and spiritually dynamic Christianity. For others, it's a threat to established norms, which might be another reason these teachings slipped into obscurity. But controversies about specific figures and suppressed roles are just one side of the coin. We also find references to dire warnings and prophecies about the future, disturbing glimpses into what Jesus might have foreseen for humanity. The question is, are these predictions any more credible than the mainstream prophecies, or do they simply reflect the anxieties of a persecuted minority? Let's look into those darker and often chilling messages next. Among the fragments of lost texts, you can occasionally find passages attributed to Jesus that sound deeply unsettling. They speak of cataclysmic events, tumultuous changes in nature, and the moral decay of civilizations. While apocalyptic themes do exist in the canonical Bible, such as in the Book of Revelation, some apocryphal writings suggest Jesus articulated even more alarming scenarios, warning that humanity's misuse of free will would spiral into chaos. Could these warnings have been withheld because they clashed with the Church's mission to maintain hope and stability among believers? Or were they perceived as too fantastical to be taken seriously? In certain obscure manuscripts, Jesus is depicted as foreseeing a time when worldly institutions, including religious ones, would become so entangled in worldly power that they lose sight of true spirituality. He allegedly cautioned that the real danger lies not in foreign armies or natural disasters alone, but in the willingness of the faithful to surrender their inner spark out of fear or complacency. If these messages had been widely circulated, would they have undermined the Church's political alliances throughout history? It's no secret that religion and governance have often walked hand in hand, and a prophecy highlighting corruption at the highest levels might be seen as a risk to those in power. Certain legends also reference sealed words, describing advanced knowledge that Jesus intended only for those who were spiritually prepared. These might include methods for direct communion with higher realms, cryptic clues about the afterlife, or esoteric guidance on transcending physical limitations. The idea is simultaneously exciting and terrifying. If real, this hidden guidance might open doors to profound spiritual experiences, but it might also be misused. The fear of such misuse could be a genuine rationale behind burying these teachings. Now, before we take another step, I need to remind you, if you're finding these topics worthwhile, don't forget to like, subscribe to this channel, and leave a comment sharing your own perspective. And if you feel especially supportive, consider using the Super Thanks bar feature. We pour our hearts into uncovering insightful and controversial material to keep you informed and intrigued. So as to join this community house of curious minds, and let's continue unraveling mysteries together. With that said, we still have more ground to cover. The largest repository of potential secrets might lie in one of the most guarded locations on Earth, the Vatican. Rumors swirl about locked archives containing manuscripts so shocking that revealing them could spark worldwide unrest. Are these rumors justified speculation or just sensationalism? Whatever the truth, the persistent chatter points to a fascinating possibility that some of Jesus's spookiest and most provocative teachings have been meticulously kept from the public. Let's look more closely at why the Vatican, in particular, is often spotlighted when it comes to secrecy. The Vatican's secret archives have long fueled the imagination of historians, conspiracy theorists, and believers. While not as dramatically hidden as popular culture suggests, they do have a catalog system and allow limited scholarly access. Certain documents remain sealed for reasons often described as diplomatic or sensitive. Skeptics argue that these restricted texts typically involve political matters, negotiations between past popes and secular rulers, for instance, but others insist that hidden in those miles of shelves are lost scriptures, diaries of controversial church figures, or even direct references to a drastically different narrative about Jesus. Why specifically blame the Vatican? Historically, it served as the epicenter of Catholic power for centuries, wielding influence over much of Europe and beyond. If any institution had the resources to collect and safeguard forbidden documents, it would be this one. Allegations abound that certain popes ordered the retrieval of unapproved gospels, stashing them away to prevent chaos or dissent. Could it be that behind locked doors lie testimonies from early Christian communities detailing advanced metaphysical teachings, or accounts of Jesus performing feats that challenge conventional doctrine? One particularly tantalizing rumor involves a chronovisor, a supposed device allegedly invented by a Benedictine monk, allowing users to witness past events, including Jesus' crucifixion. While widely dismissed as science fiction, stories like this show the extravagant lengths to which some people go in imagining what the Vatican might keep under wraps. Even if the chronovisor tale is pure invention, it underscores the potent mix of skepticism and awe surrounding this institution's secretive reputation. Furthermore, whisperings of suppressed manuscripts extend beyond just Gnostic writings. Some claim there are letters between early church figures that admit to redacting certain passages from the canonical Gospels. Others hint at centuries-old prophecies validated by apparitions or mystical encounters, which remain undisclosed for fear they might ignite panic. Naturally, the Vatican has repeatedly denied housing any such damning documents, and historians caution that while the Church had extensive holdings of manuscripts, many have been catalogued and studied without revealing anything nearly as shocking as these rumors suggest. So where does that leave us? On one hand, modern scholarship has made enormous strides, translating and analyzing ancient texts once thought lost or destroyed. On the other, the aura of secrecy remains, partly because the Catholic Church remains cautious about releasing every scrap of historical documentation. The truth may well be more mundane than the rumors imply, yet for those who suspect that the most disturbing truths about Jesus remain locked away, the existence of massive, largely inaccessible archives stands as a looming question mark. All of this sets the stage for a final consideration. How might these suppressed narratives shape our view not just of history but of modern life? If indeed we have been denied a deeper glimpse into Jesus' teachings, what does that mean for our current spiritual outlook and personal growth? The answer might be more surprising and possibly more shocking than any conspiracy theory. In our fast-paced world, it's easy to see Jesus as a distant historical figure whose lessons belong in church services or academic discussions. But if the rumors of a more radical, empowering, and sometimes frightening set of teachings hold even a grain of truth, then we might be missing out on insights that could transform how we live. For centuries, people have turned to the canonical Gospels for moral guidance and spiritual comfort, yet these rumored, lost instructions might push us far beyond comfort zones into realms where the line between the divine and the human is blurred. Think about what it would mean if humans truly possessed the capacity to direct reality through conscious intention and spiritual unity. That concept is both thrilling and scary. It puts enormous responsibility in our hands. No longer could we passively wait for external salvation. Instead, we'd need to take an active role in our spiritual evolution. Likewise, if Jesus had truly seen events spanning centuries ahead, predicting corruption in religious institutions, warning of catastrophic shifts in nature, then these teachings might serve as a stark wake-up call. Our era's environmental crises, political turmoil, and widespread search for meaning could echo prophecies that were buried long ago. The influence on personal identity might also be significant. If Mary Magdalene or other marginalized figures played central roles, modern believers could be inspired to rethink leadership structures. Women, or anyone historically sidelined, might discover fresh validation for their voices in spiritual communities. Institutional dogma could give way to a more inclusive vision that fosters personal empowerment and direct divine experience. This doesn't necessarily mean discarding tradition. It might mean deepening and broadening it, acknowledging all the facets of early Christian wisdom that history tried to hush. Finally, let's consider the potential ripple effect on interfaith dialogue. If Jesus was indeed versed in teachings from other cultures, or if his secret knowledge reflected universal principles found in multiple world religions, then learning about that could help bridge religious divides. It might weaken claims that one tradition alone holds the ultimate truth. Such a shift could foster a more collaborative approach to spirituality, where individuals see common ground rather than irreconcilable differences. In short, the scariest. Lost knowledge of Jesus might not be scary because it's sinister. but because it challenges our inertia. It urges us to step outside the boundaries of what we've been told is safe and certain. Whether you view these stories as fact or myth, the questions they raise are worth pondering. Are we living beneath our true potential? Have we accepted an incomplete version of spiritual truth? And if the answers to these questions are yes, then what's preventing us from seeking the fullest picture possible? Let those questions linger. Now, before we tie everything together in our conclusion, pause for a moment and reflect. If even a fraction of these lost teachings hold genuine wisdom, then each of us has a lot to gain by looking beyond the official narrative. And perhaps that is the real shocker. How much more there might be out there waiting for anyone willing to look. We began this journey by asking if truly unsettling knowledge about Jesus could have been deliberately erased or hidden from the public eye. Through examining forgotten gospels, suppressed figures like Mary Magdalene, rumored journeys to far-off lands and alleged chilling prophecies, we've seen how the search for a more complete understanding of Jesus often collides with institutional narratives. While some claims veer into the realm of speculation or even fantasy, the consistent undercurrent is that the historical and spiritual significance of Jesus may be far richer and more complex than we were led to believe. This possibility carries real weight. If those earlier communities had circulated texts describing advanced spiritual practices, global perspectives, or radical egalitarian ideas, then our present-day faith traditions would look drastically different. If, as some suspect, certain manuscripts were hidden by powerful church authorities, be it to maintain order, preserve political alliances, or protect believers from unsettling truths, then we face a profound question. Who gets to decide which parts of Jesus' legacy we can explore? There is no easy answer. Many dedicated scholars find no credible evidence of deliberate cover-ups, suggesting that these so-called lost teachings simply didn't align with the theology and culture that prevailed. Others are convinced that glimpses of these forbidden insights have survived, pointing to newly discovered codices or cryptic references in the margins of ancient writings. Regardless of where you stand, the common ground is our collective curiosity. What if we've only seen a fraction of the whole picture? This reflection doesn't have to undermine anyone's faith. On the contrary, it could enrich it, opening avenues for deeper contemplation about what it means to be human, what the divine might truly entail, and how we can embody the love and compassion Jesus exemplified. It asks us to broaden our spiritual lens, to consider how hidden stories might expand our sense of wonder. The ultimate scare might be realizing that what was lost could lead us to a more expansive, transformative form of faith, one that doesn't shy away from personal power, equality, or direct relationship with the sacred. As we close, let's not forget the stakes. If any portion of these rumored teachings accurately represents Jesus' message, then stifling them has limited our capacity for spiritual growth. Isn't it time we approach these possibilities with openness? Whether or not these documents lie sealed in the Vatican or sit unnamed in a collector's library, the question endures: are we ready to embrace a broader vision of Jesus' life and teachings? Reflect on that. Challenge yourself to go beyond the familiar lines, because the scariest lost knowledge may not be frightening for the reasons we assume. It might simply be that once revealed, it would leave no part of our lives and our world unchanged.